if you're a woman with responsive desire, you need something to happen in order to get in the mood and desire intimacy. So what that often looks like is maybe it's little messages throughout the day. Maybe it is some kissing, some cuddling, some stroking without the expectation of sex. That's the key. There must be no expectation, right? So when those things are happening and we feel we're going to have sex afterwards, that shuts us off. We need those things to happen without any expectation. So it's almost like, cool, I want, if you give me a back rub and then gently you start kissing me and then we're cuddling in bed at night and you're stroking my body and maybe your hand gently grazes my nipple and then I start feeling a stirring and something starts happening inside of me and suddenly I'm like, oh, that feels nice. I want something more. Problem is we're never allowed to get to that place of wanting something more because we're always having to do it before we can even get there. And so our association with sex and intimacy becomes it's a chore. It's something I have to do as opposed to something I want to do. And then the other piece of the puzzle is because we've never been taught to speak up about our needs, our desires, we're having sex that's quite lackluster. That's not necessarily meeting our needs. For many women, they're not orgasming. I mean, I faked it for 15 years. None of my partners had any idea at the time.
So hello and welcome to Blending and Mending. On the channel today, we have Heloise Haupt. Now, Heloise and I touched paths or crossed paths about a year and a half ago. I think it was a year and a half ago. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but she's a pleasure, intimate, and self-pleasure coach. I hope I've got all of that correct. And one of the things that I adored about you when you reached out to me a year and a half ago to be on your podcast, it was a podcast recording that we did.
Series,
Yes. It was just, you were so raw, so real, so authentic. And I remember with me starting the podcast last year, I thought, oh, Chantal, this could be a bit too spicy. And this year, I'm embracing it all. So, Heloise, thank you so much for joining us. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a self-love, pleasure, and intimacy coach. And I definitely would not have picked this for myself as a career path at all. It's not like I woke up one day and I was like, oh, I want to help people with their sex lives. No, I kind of fell into this because I was experiencing my own sexual struggles. So I faked my orgasms for 15 years. And in 2018, I went through a really bad breakup where I was told, once again, it's not you, it's me. And that kind of forced me to dive a little bit deeper and really explore what was going on in my relationships, how I was showing up in relationship and partnership. And what I noticed was I was doing everything for everyone. And this was a pattern that was showing up in all aspects of my life. So I thought that if I was the perfect girlfriend, the perfect partner, if I took care of them, if I wore the sexy lingerie, if I did everything perfectly, I would get the love I so badly craved and wanted. And the problem with that was I was not factoring in my pleasure, my satisfaction at all. So I faked my orgasms. The first time I was intimate with someone was when I was 16 years old. And nothing prepared me for that experience. I'd watched movies, I'd watched TV shows, and it's kind of all this like passion, and we remove the clothes and everything miraculously fits where it needs to fit. And then you have this beautiful climax together and it's amazing. And here I was at 16 years old, and things didn't really fit in as easily as I'd anticipated. And then I was like, it's okay if it doesn't fit at one point. And then I pushed through and felt nothing. And I didn't know what to do in that moment. So I felt too ashamed to say anything. So I faked it, I pretended. And that started a long pattern of me pretending and faking it because I didn't know how to advocate for my pleasure, what felt good to me. I didn't know what felt good to me in partnered experiences with someone else. No one had taught me what that looked like. And I felt ashamed to even share this with my closest girlfriends because everyone around me seemed to be having amazing sex lives. It was incredible. And they were wanting sex the whole time. And here I was not understanding what was wrong with my body. So initially I thought the right man, the right person is going to solve all my problems. And that just didn't happen. So this became this like deep, dark, shameful thing that I carried with myself for many years. And when I got to this breakup, I was just like, I have done everything to be loved, everything, showed up in every way how I should have shown up, how I should have received love. And here I was, single, alone, all over again. And so
Yeah.
I started asking myself some really hard questions, and I realized no one wants to be with a doormat. No one wants to be with someone who's always deferring. Oh, what do you feel like doing? Oh, I'll do whatever you want to do. I'll do whatever makes you happy. And that for me was the beginning, the catalyst of this journey I got on now, because I realized I'm able to feel pleasure on my own. I was able to orgasm on my own, just not with a partner.
Mm-hmm.
So that started a deep dive exploration into what was holding me back. Why could I not experience this pleasure with a partner? And ultimately, the realization that I had never learned to prioritize myself, my pleasure,
Yeah.
to put my needs first. And so that's where, for me, the self love, pleasure, and orgasm coaching came from. Because if we're not able to prioritize ourselves, if we're not able to put ourselves first, that piece is a self-love piece. We're going to struggle to ask for what we need in the bedroom, even
Mm-hmm.
demand it. It's very hard to be, oh, please can you focus on me a little bit, or this is what I need in order to experience pleasure, if you've not done that self-love piece. And it sounds so cliche now, but how many of us have struggles around our body image, the way that we look? Growing up in society today, it's almost impossible not to struggle with those things. And so if we're not working on that self-love piece, that self-acceptance piece, it's going to be really, really hard for us to take time out of our busy days and schedules to prioritize ourselves, to prioritize our pleasure. So that brings us next to the next piece, which is pleasure. What is pleasure to you? What does that look like? How do you enjoy pleasure? Pleasure doesn't always have to be sexual. There's so many non-sexual pleasurable things that we can do, and we don't take the time for it because it feels frivolous. It's like, we'll get to that, once my to-do list, everything's checked off. And if you're not able to spend time focusing on your pleasure, well, your orgasm is going to be far off into the distant future, because
Mm-hmm.
an orgasm is a buildup of pleasure. And so if we're not able to focus on the things that bring us pleasure, that piece becomes very elusive. So that's, in a nutshell, how I got to doing what I'm doing today.
I mean, there's so much there, though. So, firstly, thank you for the vulnerability. Um, and it's so interesting because you're so right. We link so much of what we need to be on these societal pressures. Um, we're raised, and I've discussed this in previous podcasts, we're raised to focus on others, right? We
Yeah,
need to be kind, we need to share. And you're taught this from a really, really young age. But no one from a really young age also teaches you that it's okay to think about yourself too.
yeah,
Two, we
yeah,
forget about that. And then we struggle to figure this out in relationships because, again, the movies say, even potentially dynamics between parents say that if I'm submissive, if I wear the right things, do the right things, say the right things, you'll be proud to have me by your arm or by your side. And we lose what we need in the moment. And
yeah.
I love how you've latched that into self love, pleasure, intimacy. That's actually such a beautiful, it's like a little formula in terms of what you can do to really look after yourself.
Yeah, and that little formula, that's all part of my come first method. That's literally what the come first method is. It starts with self-love,
Yeah.
pleasure, and eventually that leads to the grand finale. So we
And
need that.
I might be jumping the gun, but I mean, I've got a client at the moment and they've just had a baby 6 months old, husband wants sex, and she's saying, that's the last thing I want to think about right now. And it's interesting because a lot of the conversations also come through with clients of mine in general where they speak about, but I don't feel pretty right now. I don't feel like myself right now. And it's interesting in terms of that formula. If you're not happy with where you're at, the ripple effect that has in your relationship and in your sex life.
Yeah, absolutely. And for many of us, we were never taught these things, right? So
Mm-hmm.
first of all, speaking about sex, sexuality is pretty much taboo. I mean,
Taboo.
yesterday I had a reel taken down from Facebook. I was offered advice for sexual solicitation. And all I'm trying to do is educate women around basic sexuality. And so when we realize how taboo it is to actually have these conversations, to speak about these things, it helps us understand, first of all, why we carry so much shame, because we
Mhm.
literally have nowhere where it's safe to have these conversations.
Yeah.
We have nowhere where it's safe for us to actually learn these tools. What does that look like? And so for many of us, we went through adolescence where, oh, you shouldn't touch your body, girls don't touch themselves. So we never learned what gives us pleasure, what feels good to our bodies. And then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly we found ourselves in partnership with another human being. And now we're supposed to know how our body works, what feels good to us, and enjoy this experience. And we feel ashamed of our bodies. Many of us have never even looked at ourselves or looked at ourselves down there and seen what we look like. So now we've got to be comfortable with someone else doing things to us when we're carrying so much shame for just how our body functions.
It's crazy, yeah.
It's impossible to enjoy yourself from that perspective. Totally impossible.
So I knew having you on, this was going to be such a deep conversation and it was going to be a fun conversation, but I knew we were going to really anchor into some of the deeper belief systems as part of this because you can't separate it.
Yeah.
Um, for the topic specifically today, when you and I were playing around with what should we chat through, I think for me, again, what I'm seeing quite a lot in the practice, what I'm hearing from friends, and even in my own space, I mean, life gets busy. You're juggling kids, co curriculars, jobs, part time practice. It's crazy. And then you still have to make time to be intimate with your partner. And sure, that came out wrong to say have to be intimate with your partner,
I think I have to
but
do
red flag. But I
it.
mean, this is reality for so many people. And I think for us, we really wanted to unpack with the listeners and viewers is how do you keep the spark alive in between life that sometimes does feel quite chaotic? So, what are you seeing in your space and what can you give us some guidance on?
So I think the biggest false narrative that we have is great sex just happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Desire just happens. If I love my partner, I should automatically desire them. I should
Yeah.
automatically be in the mood if I love them. These things should just happen. It's an automatic response. It's not something that I have to work on. It's not something that I have to create. And again, if you look around, movies, series, all of that, that's what we see everywhere, which generally, when you look at that, that's spontaneous arousal. And most women do not have spontaneous arousal. So when we understand that, we can understand there's actually nothing wrong with us. We need something to happen. I think it's 75% of women have responsive desire. We need something to happen in order for us to get in the mood. So I've got a beautiful quiz which will help you figure out your desire type. But for right now, if you just understand the three types of arousal, so there's generally spontaneous arousal, responsive desire, and then contextual desire. So if you
Okay.
understand that, that goes a long way to supporting you to figure out what's going on in your relationship. Because suddenly it's not your fault if you walk out the shower and hubby sees you and you're in your gown and he's there and he's like, whew, I'm feeling the heat. Things are looking hot right now. I want something to happen here. And you're like, I've just showered. I've just taken care of the kids all day. Like, looking at
This
you
is
lying
the
there
last.
naked in the bed.
Yeah.
This is the last thing I feel like doing. Like, I'm really not there. And his mind's already there. He's super keen. He's probably got an erection and he's like, cool, I'm ready for it. And you're
Mhm.
like, I'm just not there. That is normal. That needs to be normalized. Women, a lot of the time, need something to happen to get in the mood. Now, the problem is we've never been taught that. So,
Mhm.
what happens is we're not in the mood. He's there, ready, guns blazing. And we're like, oh, it's been a few weeks. I've turned him down. I've had multiple headaches. I've, rejected his advances. I suppose I'm just going to have to do it tonight. So then we have sex from this place of having to do it, expectation.
Yeah.
And when we're doing sex from that place, we start resenting our partner because they're taking from us. It no longer feels like a mutually beneficial experience.
Mhm.
It's, I'm doing it for you. They're always wanting sex. That's the only thing they're interested in. They're not
Mhm.
actually interested in me as an individual. And so when this happens, we then start avoiding all kinds of intimacy because, well, if I walk out the shower naked and he sees me and he's ready to go, now I'm going to put my towel on or get dressed in the bathroom. If I give him a kiss goodbye and he's like, oh, pushing me, no, I'm no longer going to kiss him goodbye. I'm no longer going to cuddle him for movie nights on the couch. I'm going to put the kids between him and I so that there's this gap so nothing can lead to this thing that I don't feel like doing. And we think there's something wrong with us.
Is that conscious or subconscious?
A lot of the time we're not even aware of it. We're just
Mhm.
trying to get by. So
Yeah.
we're doing these things not from a place of awareness. It's we don't feel like this thing. And think about it, it's quite natural, right? If you don't feel like doing something, you're going to do everything to avoid it. And we're expected to desire intimacy, to feel like intimacy, when
Mm-hmm.
the intimacy we're having a lot of the time isn't desirable.
Sure.
So why would you want it?
Could you give me examples? I mean, you threw out a stat there of 75% of women are typically responsive.
Yeah.
What would that look like? Could you give me an example of what
So
that dynamic is that needs to play out?
So if you're a woman with responsive desire, you need something to happen in order to get in the mood and desire intimacy. So what that often looks like is maybe it's little messages throughout the day. Maybe it is some kissing, some cuddling, some stroking without the expectation of sex. That's the key. There must be no expectation, right? So when those things are happening and we feel we're going to have sex afterwards, that shuts us off. We
Mm-hmm.
need those things to happen without any expectation. So it's almost like, cool, I want, if you give me a back rub and then gently you start kissing me and then we're cuddling in bed at night and you're stroking my body and maybe
Yeah.
your hand gently grazes my nipple. And then I start feeling a stirring and something starts happening inside of me. And suddenly I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that feels nice. I want something more. Problem is, we're never allowed to get to that place of wanting something more because we're always having to do it before we can even get there. And
Yeah.
so our association with sex and intimacy becomes it's a chore. It's something I have to do as opposed to something I want to do. And then the other piece of the puzzle is because we've never been taught to speak up about our needs, our desires, we're having sex that's quite lackluster. That's not necessarily meeting our needs. For many women, they're not orgasming. I mean, I faked it for 15 years. None of
Mm-hmm.
my partners had any idea at the time. I suppose if they really were curious,
I
they
was
might
going to
have
say how.
an idea. None of them had any idea. And so we're blissfully ignorant.
Yeah.
And if she's moaning and groaning and seems to be happy, we're going to be all too happy with that. And so the
Mm-hmm.
problem is if you're not able to speak up and ask for what you need, and maybe you don't know what you need, these are all things you can work on. If you can't speak up in the moment and be, you know what, like, I actually don't feel like penetrative sex tonight. I would just like to cuddle and stroke, and maybe, there's a variety of different things we can do. But we all rush to penetration. That's the be all and end all of a sexual experience. And when I ask women how many of them penetrate themselves whilst masturbating, very few women do. Most women, it's clitoral stimulation all the way. That's what gets them going. And yet, when
Mm-hmm.
we're having sexual experiences with someone else, we get very little clitoral stimulation. And then we're wondering why we're struggling to orgasm, why we don't feel like it, why we're not desiring these experiences, because they're not working for us. They don't make us feel good. So it's natural to not want something that doesn't feel good. So there's actually
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with you.
So I'm really going to dig deep here. My poor mom is going to listen to this podcast and be like, what? Um, so what I find, and it was the same with Tristan and I, and again with so many of my clients, is in the beginning, the beginning phases of the relationship, right? It's oxytocin through the roof. And I mean, we know a lot of studies show that oxytocin, that up and down, is very similar to this cocaine addiction, right? So studies validate that. So in the beginning, you cannot wait to just see your partner have sex everywhere, do what you need to do because you're really enjoying that time with that person. And I mean, Tristan and I always say that in the beginning we couldn't get enough of each other. And I mean, that for us, I think we had a really good run at it, right? Because they say oxytocin lasts between 6 months to 18 months. We were solid for about 2.5 years, right? We always gave each other a high five and like, we've got this. And it's this progression. And again, like I was asking, is it conscious or subconscious? Where life starts to happen, routine starts to happen, responsibility, the kids, we've moved into our own home, the bills. And now I'm going to try not to get emotional. But I said to Tristan earlier today, I said to him, we've got Heloise on the call. Is there anything that you want to ask her? And his response to me, which I thought was quite passive aggressive, and he said it wasn't, so we need to figure that out. But he said to me, ask her if I need to make an appointment to have sex. Is that the way I need to go about it, so that I could just be with you? And I kind of like looked at him and I actually had no idea what to say because we probably haven't been intimate now for 2.5, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And it has been exactly what you were explaining earlier. It's the cycle, it's the busyness, it's stress, and when you say those things out loud, yes, it validates it as a woman of why I don't want it. And like you're saying, men turn on like this and it doesn't matter what's going on. You can have the biggest rip roar fight and all they want to do is rip your clothes off later. And with women, we're like, no, like, let's think about this. Let's unpack it. It's going to take time to rebuild this rapport and trust. And I struggled with his response. And I just thought to myself, like, with everything that we have, that was your response to my question. And immediately it kicks into the I'm not doing enough, the guilt, the shame. Um, yeah, it can be quite tricky. Yeah.
Chantal, thank you so much, first of all, for sharing that so bravely. A vulnerable thing to share as well. And you're not alone in that experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? I share that so many women struggle with this thing of love does not equal desire.
Yeah.
What you describe at the beginning of the relationship, it's you've got all those chemicals, everything flooding your system. You don't love your partner or your boyfriend at the beginning of a relationship. Love hasn't formed yet, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that is just pure desire and
Lust.
love. That's right? There's nothing else that's keeping you going. But you need that in order for love to take a foothold, right? You need that to happen in order to determine, right, is there something here? Could this become something more? And to start loving
Mm-hmm.
them. And for a lot of us, we look at the beginning of a relationship and we assume everything was spontaneous about it. So when we look at the beginning phase, it's like, oh, but we were having sex all over the show and, we were spending all this time together. But I tell every single one of my clients that is the most heavily planned time of any relationship because a lot of the time you weren't living together. So
No,
what
we
did
weren't.
you planned when you were going to see each other? You planned what you were going to do on these dates. No better foreplay in the world than being, oh my goodness, I'm going to see my lover on Friday and it's Monday. And I get to think all week, what am I going to wear? What am I going to dress up in? Where are we going to meet up? Are we going to kiss? Are we not going to kiss? Is he going to
Yeah.
take me to his place afterwards? What does that look like? That's all part of the foreplay. And so there's a lot of planning that goes down at the beginning of a relationship. Even, you speak with a lot of women that have gone through divorce, blended families, you know, you've got to navigate kids, who's taking care of the kids, is it going to, so there's so much planning at the beginning of
Mm-hmm.
a relationship and we forget that. And so all that planning means we've scheduled and created time for intimacy to happen. And that's what we forget later on. So then we move in, we start living with each other, things start feeling really comfortable, and we fall madly deeply in love. And so love has now flourished. We might leave the bathroom door open when we go into the loo. Again, nothing wrong with that. But a little bit of the mystery subsides, right? And the
Uh-huh.
easiest way to explain this is I do not desire the dress I have in my closet. I might love it. I might want to wear it every single weekend. I might think it's the most beautiful dress in the world, but I am physically not yearning for that dress. I don't need that dress. It's
Mm-hmm.
there. It's mine. I desire the dress that's in the shops that I don't yet have, that I'm keen to discover what am I going to look like in that. And I'm curious, oh my goodness, if I wear it and I go to a party, what are people going to think of me? How exciting is that going to be? That's desire. And so the problem is we're not doing anything to, first of all, cultivate desire in our relationships long term. And so we're like, well, we love each other. So that's better than desire. We should just be there. This should automatically be happening.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not creating any time for your relationship, for intimacy to happen. You're assuming it's just automatically going to happen. And so when you're
Yeah.
asking, like, what are the biggest struggles I see with my clients? It's this waiting for the moment to rise, waiting for myself to suddenly feel like it. And that's probably not going to happen if you're not creating a specific set of circumstances in order for that to arise. For many of us, we're not doing anything like that in
Mm-hmm.
our lives because we're stressed, we're picking up kids from school, we're feeding kids, we're dropping them off here and there, we're trying to fit work in between all of this. And then when it comes to 8:30 at night, we're
Shattered.
exhausted. We're sitting on the couch, we're Netflixing and chilling, we're not even speaking to our partners. And so that is not conducive to feeling close and
Mm-hmm.
connected and to doing anything sexy in the bedroom afterwards because we're just exhausted. So, the advice I give all my clients is first of all, a weekly check in.
Mm-hmm.
This will revolutionize and change your life. A weekly check in. Spend 60 minutes every single week, 30 to 60 minutes, and speak about your relationship. Speak about what's working, what's not working. What would you like more of? What would you like less of? The more
Mhm.
we get used to speaking about this, the more we can start planning things in our lives. So for many of us, we've never done this. I mean, I have clients extremely resistant to this, and their lives transform when they welcome in my weekly check-in. I do this pretty much on the daily with my partner. That's where I'm at the
Mhm.
moment. It feels it's something I do. I can't live without it. In the evening, we spend literally at least 60 minutes just speaking about our lives. What's good, what wasn't good, what would we like to change? But it creates an opportunity for you to have these conversations. Because what happens is if you're avoiding speaking about the topic, that oops,
Mhm.
we haven't had sex in 2.5 weeks and we don't know why. And now it's becoming this elephant in the room. It's becoming this thing. Because now you're starting to feel the pressure, like what's wrong with
Yeah.
me? Why is it not happening? And you don't have the tools necessarily to have the conversation with your husbands or your partners. So you're both feeling it, but you don't know what to do about it. You don't know
Mhm.
how to bridge that gap. And so it's like, well, should I just do it? And when we do it from that place of expectation, well, that's a downhill loop.
Yeah.
That's not a positive one to get into. But if I've got a way to be in the mood, when's that going to happen? Because it hasn't happened in 2.5 weeks. But you're not doing anything to support yourself to get there. So when you have your weekly check-in, you're then also going to schedule time for, and when I say intimacy, it's not sex, it's planning date nights. So you get to decide the frequency of these based on your schedule and again, what you desire for your sex life, right? So we all have different sex drives,
Yeah.
very natural, very natural. Very few couples have the same sex drive. And so when you're scheduling this, you've got to factor that in and you're scheduling opportunities for sex to happen. You're not scheduling in sex. Because if I'm scheduling in sex, again, that's putting a lot of pressure on me, a lot of obligation that, oh my God, this has to result in sex. And then you
Yeah.
go into the experience feeling a bit icky, especially for women. Men, maybe scheduled sex feels good for them, but most women, that doesn't feel good. So you're scheduling time to be intimate. So this can look like planning a dinner out and getting a babysitter for the kids. And you go out to dinner and you spend time connecting, chatting,
Mhm.
feeling close. And what that's going to do is it's going to reset your nervous system. You're going to suddenly feel more connected to this person across you. They're going to share parts of their day and you get to see them in a different light. Like, oh my goodness, this actually happened for you today, or you dealt with that so beautifully. I'm so proud of you, babe. Whatever
Yeah.
that looks like. And then you come home and maybe you do a bubble bath or you spend some time cuddling on the couch and kissing. Switch the TV off. You don't need the TV.
Mhm.
And that will lead to something else down the line. But if we're not creating moments, pockets for that to happen, it's
Mhm.
unlikely to just naturally happen, especially with our busy days and lives.
So I love the intentionality around it because it is, you need to be intentional about spending that time together. And I have a friend, him and his wife have been married now, I think, for 15 years. And he was saying their secret sauce is they take a bath together. And it's something that Tristan and I've started doing where we don't have the kids and it's actually very sweet. We go all out. It's bubbles and candles and glasses of wine. And we just sit in the bath until we're pruned up like two old people. And we keep topping up the hot water where we're just sitting there and we're talking to each other. And then, yes, obviously things flow into the next. But it's so interesting where you're speaking about the regulated nervous system because you really do feel so safe and there's psychological safety in that moment to want to lean in, to want to be close. So, yeah, I love that.
It's an opening, and for many of us, we have no openings in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're frustrated, when you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed, there's no opening for your nervous system to get there. And
Yeah.
that's another piece for me why I focus so much on pleasure. Because as women, we're not taught to prioritize our pleasure at all throughout the day. So we're not doing anything to regulate our nervous systems, to feel joy, to
Mm-hmm.
feel happiness throughout the day. And so if we're not taking care of ourselves throughout the day, and we're like on edge, taking care of the kids and everything, and now hubby's come home and we've got to do dinner, very difficult from that place to suddenly relax and calm
Yeah.
down, be open to anything. Whereas if we're taking just 5 minutes out throughout our day to focus on what do we need? What would feel good to us right now, right? What does pleasure look like for me in this moment? Is it, instead of rushing my coffee, lugging it down my throat and then running out the door, is it spending 5 minutes just sitting outside looking at the birds as I sip my
Yeah.
coffee? It's simple, basic little things that we take no time to do.
And again, I think for me, it loops back to the beginning of the conversation where we are so focused on everyone else.
Yeah,
that we don't take the time to focus on ourselves. And it's so interesting. I mean, I often say to my clients, if you need to feel grounded, take your shoes off, go stand on the grass outside, have the cup of chamomile tea, like you're saying, appreciate those moments and be mindful. I very honestly have never thought about standing in the garden, holding my chamomile tea, and thinking what pleasure looks like for me. Because when I think about pleasure, I think about him. I don't think about myself.
and
And
that's a big
that's an aha moment.
yeah, that's a big gap because pleasure is, I mean, I love to tell clients if you take the palm of your hand right now, and I mean, anyone listening can do this, take the palm of your hand and take your other hand and just gently tickle the palm of your hand and
Yeah.
notice what that feels like for you, right? So you'll notice you might want firmer touch, softer touch. I happen to really like soft, light touch. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
tickling the palm of my hand and that's feeling good to me. That feels nice. And so that's something you can do anywhere. It takes no time, no money, nothing. You can do that anywhere. And so you can go from tickling the palm of your hand to tickling and stroking your arm to tickling and stroking your body. It's an opening, it's a
It's an
pause.
opening.
And that's what I think a
Honestly,
lot of us are looking for.
I know I need to get to the questions of what other people want to ask. Like, I just want to ask all my questions. We're already 30 minutes in. So we're going to have to do a part two with Heloise Haupt. So let me get the questions quick. So there were a few questions that really stood out to me. And I loved, again, the honesty in the questions that have come through. So I've chosen three. The first is how do I get out of my head and into the moment while we're doing it? I get distracted thinking about what he's thinking of me. What would your advice be there?
So that's again very common. A lot of us struggle with this, and we're struggling with this because we're spectatoring, right? So what's almost happening is we're zooming out and we're focusing on what do I look like? Is he worried
Mm-hmm.
about my fat rolls? Is he worried about my stomach? Can you see my double chin?
Cellulite.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, do I smell funny? All of these things. And when we're worried
yeah.
about all of these things, we're a million miles away. We're not in the moment. We're not at all connected to our bodies. We're not connected to our pleasure. And so for many of us, we've learned to feel safe in our heads. So it's almost like we've disconnected ourselves from our body and we're just thinking our way through it. And you cannot think your way through sex. You have to feel your way, right? Sex is an embodied experience. It's happening in your body. You need to feel that experience. And so the easiest tool that I can suggest for you is if you're struggling with that,
Mm-hmm.
stop whatever you're doing in that moment and start breathing. You can breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And start breathing and noticing what sensations you are feeling. So if you're focused on your breath and focusing on your sensations, your brain cannot think of anything else. It's literally
So it's like
impossible.
grounding moments
Yeah.
while you're having sex. That's so
And
interesting.
you're going to have to be very mindful of that because what's going to happen the minute you stop breathing and focusing on the sensations you're feeling, you're going to go straight out to thinking, oh my goodness, what's he thinking? What's going on? And the more
Mm-hmm.
you're worried about what's he thinking, I'm taking too long, my orgasm's not arriving, the more your
Yes.
orgasm is going to run away with you, right? So the enemy of the orgasm is wanting to orgasm.
Yeah.
So let go of the orgasm. And in that moment, just focus on your pleasure. And so when you're
Mm-hmm.
breathing, oh, what feels good to me right now? Is it the way he's touching me? Okay, can I ask him to touch me more that way? Okay, that
Mm-hmm.
feels nice. Just focus on what feels good to you. Focus on the sensations in your body. What is the sensation of pleasure for you in your body? What does that feel like?
Yeah. When I read that question, I thought about that scene from Eat, Pray, Love with Julia Roberts. And she's sitting in Italy and she's eating her pizza. And she's like, I'm having a love affair with my pizza. And her friend doesn't want to eat the pizza. She was like, no, I'm not fitting into my pants anymore. And Julia Roberts looks at her and said, has a man ever walked out of a room where you've stood in front of him naked? And she says, no. And he's like, of course not. He's getting lucky. There's a naked girl in front of him. Um, and again, I think it's societal. I think we think we need to look a certain way. Our boobs need to be perked up in a certain way. And we're wearing this padded bra that hurts the hell out of us, but it's going to look really pretty for him. That's all that matters. And it's really about centering again, just appreciating the moment and appreciating who you are. And I know that's easier said than done for some people, especially when they look in the mirror and they don't like what they see, but your partner is in that moment with you because they're desiring you and every inch of you. And it's, for me, it's that mind shift and that anchoring of that thought too, Because he's here for me. She's here
Yeah.
for me, whatever your dynamic might be.
And when you can be there for yourself, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, one of the most powerful moments that I ever experienced was now, I think about 3 years ago, 3, 4 years ago. So I'd been doing a lot of mirror work, a lot of work around my body, and my partner at the time was away, and I was like, "Ooh, I'm going to send him a saucy video." So there I was in the bathroom, phone propped up against the mirror, and I'm dancing to the sexy striptease song, and I'm like, oh, and I'm moving my bra, and I'm doing my thing. And I did the video and it felt all great. And then I was like, oh, let me just check it before I send it to him. So afraid that, like, I'm going to send him something and I need to check myself. I need to manage what I'm looking like so he gets only the best version of me. And I think we've all
Yeah.
been there, done that. And there I sat on the bed and I watched this video and I watched this video, I think 20 or 30 times. And I still have the video on my phone. I'll never delete it because it was the first time in my life where I felt turned on by my own body, where I felt
Wow.
turned on by myself. And my invitation to anyone listening to this is that's the goal, right? If you can feel turned on by your own body,
Mm-hmm.
if you can look at yourself in the mirror and see nothing but pure beauty, amazingness, pleasure, this fantastic body that's allowing you to live, breathe, go about your life and do whatever it is that you want to do. All our bodies have infinite capacity for pleasure. We just have to be
Oh,
willing to
I love
unlock
that sentence. All bodies have infinite capacity for pleasure.
yeah. And we've all struggled, right? It doesn't help to be whether you are a supermodel or whether you are thinking that you're 50 kilograms overweight. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter. We've all struggled. There is no perfect one way of being.
Yeah.
There's things about my body. I was teased. I had freckles in primary school. I was teased for my freckles. I made my freckles wrong.
Yeah.
Then I've got little boobs, so they were mosquito bites, right? Then it was, oh, I should have bigger boobs. There's something wrong with my boobs. Like, we've all been teased. We've all been led to believe there is something wrong with our bodies. I have stretch
Mm-hmm.
marks. I have cellulite, like natural bodily things. But when I can start noticing my body for what my body does for me instead of what's
Mm-hmm.
wrong and what's missing, when I can start appreciating my body in terms of, oh, well, when I touch my body this way, it reacts. I can feel something that's amazing. When I can start seeing my body in that light, so much
Yeah.
can start shifting and changing. And so when I can be turned on by my own body, and then I get into the bedroom with my partner, I'm not
Just
afraid of what
imagine.
my bum's looking like or anything because this is my beautiful, glorious body. He should be so
Mm-hmm.
lucky to get to, explore this body with me, to get to play with this body, to get to have fun with this body.
Language is so important, hey, because language shapes behavior, and it's the
Yeah,
language we tell ourselves to.
yeah. It's how we talk to
Yeah,
ourselves.
so powerful. Okay, two more questions. Now I need to find them. So, what do you do when your partner has a higher sex drive than you? And I think
So
that happens in a lot of relationships.
very, very common. If you think of ice cream, we might all love ice cream, but we might not want ice cream at the same time, and we might not even want the same flavor of ice cream. So
Hmm.
we don't blame people for not wanting ice cream at the same time or not wanting the same flavor of ice cream. We accept that and we make a compromise, right? So it's exactly the same thing. In a couple, most people are going to have differences in sex drive. What I suggest is if there's always going to be a higher libido partner and a lower libido partner in every
Yeah.
single relationship. So if you are the higher libido partner, the invitation for me is you're the one who wants it more frequently than your partner. So what can you do to support them to make that easier for them to also want it more? It's not about expecting them to want it as much as you. You get to have a conversation around this. So the ideal conversation is how many times a week, month, year would you like to have sex, ideally? How many of us have even asked our partners this question? You might be
Mm.
baffled to find out the answer. And a lot of the time, it's also understanding that for men, historically, when we've withheld all forms of intimacy from them because we're afraid it's going to lead to sex, the only way for them to feel connected and close to us is through sex and pushing the sex narrative. And for a lot of men, they don't know how to express that they actually are just craving connection. They're craving feeling close to us.
I
And so
love that
suddenly when you
lens.
create more opportunities for closeness to happen, they don't actually need sex the whole time and all the time. So
Hmm.
the key here
Have
is
that.
to discover what between the two of you would be ideal. If there's a huge difference, like I'd like sex once a month and my partner would like sex 3 times a week, then okay, cool. Can we agree to create opportunities for this to happen maybe 2 or 3 times a month, if that's possible? And then the high sex drive partner can also take care of themselves. It's not my role to take care of my partner every single day just because he feels like it.
Mm-hmm. Sure, that's
We're
big.
all adults.
Because there's the expectation of if you're my partner, it is my duty.
Not your duty to please and
Yeah.
satisfy your partner. It's your duty to take care of yourself.
So, what is, and I almost don't want to ask the question, so you can see my hesitance because I love what you're unpacking there. There's almost this rule of engagement that you unpack with your partner. That's language that I often use in my couples sessions as well. Is what do we expect from each other? What are those rules of engagement? But I mean, on average, what is a normal, is there even a normal amount of sex that you should be having? Okay.
There is no normal amount of sex that you should be
Okay.
having. Some people want to have sex 3 times a day. Some people want to have it twice a day. Some people once a month. Some people once a year, and that's more than enough for them, even too much. There
Yeah.
is no normal. You get to
I
decide in
think,
your relationship what you want and what's going to result in both of you thriving. It's for
yeah.
you to have that conversation and to explore what would feel good to you. And again, noticing we go through seasons in life, right? December holidays are starting now as we're recording this. So for a lot of people, that might be a time where in-laws, family, friends are all visiting, all the kids are in the house. There's a lot of pressure. We can think, oh, we're going on holiday. What does that look like? But for us here in South Africa, there's a lot that happens around Christmas time. So intimacy might take a bit of a backseat at this time of
Yeah.
the year for some families. For others, if you're, a couple and you don't have children and you're planning a 2 week vacation, oh, well, this might just be the thing that kickstarts your sex
Sex
life.
fest.
you know, the reality is we're all in different places, different things are happening. So it's also acknowledging the season of life that you're in. If you've just
Mhm.
renovated a home and had this financial stress of, renovations going over time and all of the other things happening in your life, you might not have either of you much of a drive to be intimate because you've got a lot of other stress happening. If that's a
Mhm.
season in life, that's okay. It's knowing how to get out of that season. So for a lot of us, we get stuck in a season, we make it wrong, we make what's happening wrong, and we don't know how to address the situation.
Yeah. Conversations and intentionality again is what I'm hearing.
Yep,
Last question is how to bring up things you would like to try.
it's a juicy one.
Mm-hmm.
If this feels uncomfortable for you, express your desire without expecting the other person to want to do the thing with you. So again, it depends on what you want to try, how out there it is for you and your partner.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to try bringing in a sex toy, right? And you're afraid that they're not sure what that's going to look like. So
Mm-hmm.
again, don't bring up the conversation in the middle of sex. That's quite vulnerable. Most people are not going to be appreciative of that in the moment. It's like, oh, would you like to try sex toys? I actually bought it, like a dildo or whatever. Can we try it right now? No, not gonna for most people. So bring it outside of the bedroom, right? In your weekly checking.
That's good
Bring it in there and be
advice.
like, you know what? I saw someone trying this and it actually got me thinking, like, maybe that could be fun. What would you think
Mm-hmm.
about that? Is that something you'd be curious to explore? Does that sound like fun to you? Would you enjoy that? Or I saw something the other day and they were speaking about this thing. What do you think about it? Like, I'm curious to know. It's a nice way of bringing it in, getting to know what your partner might think about it before diving full in and being, I want to try this at all costs. If we don't try this,
Ta-da!
here's my thing, right? And we don't all have to be into the same things, right? So noticing what for you feels really important. Are they willing to meet you halfway? Is there
Mm-hmm.
an in-between thing? So a lot of the time, I say to people that I'm coaching, you might be into anal sex and your partner, that just might be a no-go zone for them. That's
Yeah.
okay. You have to respect that. So it's understanding what are your limits, what are you okay with, and what are you not okay with. Same could apply. Maybe you're curious about bringing a third person into your relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your partner might not be at all into that. You need to know that. You need to have that conversation. And it starts
There's
with a
actually
conversation at the dinner table, outside, wherever you're sitting, on the couch. and speaking about these things,
Mm-hmm.
normalizing having these conversations. Where for many of us, we don't speak about sex point blank.
Yeah. So it's carving out the time.
Yeah,
Absolutely carving out the time. And I love your steer there in terms of don't have it in the room, weave it into your weekly check in or your daily check in, but try and find that safe space to have that conversation outside of that very intimate space and then see how the
yeah,
conversation unfolds from there.
yeah.
I mean, Heloise, this is probably one of my longest recordings. I could go on for ages. How do people get a hold of you? How do they reach out to you for coaching, support? Please give us all your contact details.
So they can find me on Instagram at heloise.haupt. So you
Mm-hmm.
can find me there. You can literally reach out to me there. I also have a website, heloisehaupt.com. But generally speaking, I think Instagram's the easiest place. So you can come find me there. You'll see some posts. I have a beautiful free quiz for you that you can take to uncover your desire type. That's going to be really supportive.
Oh,
I've also
that's
got a
stunning.
beautiful course around libido if you need that. So there's lots of help. And I think the piece that I would love to leave you with is you do not need to struggle alone. This doesn't have to feel like this big burden and this big scary topic. It's just sex, right? It's a part
Mm-hmm.
of the human experience. So the more we can start having these conversations, speaking about these things, and Chantal, thank you so much for being willing to go there, right? Like being willing to have this conversation. I feel the less shame, the less stigma we're going to feel around our sexuality.
I remember when you and I spoke a year ago, um, there was this dot connect into if we didn't have that safety when we were younger to explore, to even think about sex. And then when you do, you don't tell anyone and you're being sneaky about it. How we could actually carve out and normalize how beautiful this is for our children so that they don't feel shame. Um, that's all I would want for Mila is just to really embrace herself and love herself. So that first part of your equation, so, so, so important. And
Yeah.
it starts with us.
Yeah, it does. We set the tone. We
Absolutely.
show everyone around us how we interact with our partners, the people around us, and what that looks like.
Mhm.
Very important.
I have to have you back because we need to do a part two. I will attach all the links in the conversation so that everyone's got your details. But Heloise, thank you so much for taking the time, for squeezing this recording in before you go to Mozambique on your holiday.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you must enjoy it. Enjoy your alone time, your connection time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Chantal. And thanks so much for having me here. Thank you.
Only a pleasure. Thank you.